Bryce McClenny with JB Custom Rods, and I'm here at the Bass and Saltwater Fishing Expo from Raleigh this weekend. I'm using this opportunity to talk about a type of bass fishing that we all love, we all know, but it's one of the most diverse as far as what rods you need to use out there, and that's cranking. So just at the show this weekend, we got our whole assortment of rods with us. We have 9 different cranking rods in this one little booth. And a lot of the reason for that is cranking is a very, very broad way to fish for bass, right? So you can't throw the same rod for the same application of cranking over and over and over when you're talking about a lure that could be 1/8 of an ounce baby OSP Blitz, or you could have 1.5 ounce giant crankbait on the other end of the rod. So there's no one rod that's going to do everything with cranking. Not if you're trying to do everything from one end to the other with cranking. So I'm going to go through just a few of what we got here today. Like I said, we've got 9. I'm just going to graze the surface. Come by and see us if you're in the Raleigh area. I'm going to start off talking about open water, deep cranking. Think big 1 to 1.5 ounce crankbait. This is in our lineup. It's called the Crankin XD. Using this one as an example of it, but you cannot throw a 1.5 ounce crankbait on your typical everyday deep cranking or square bill rod. And the reason is it just can't handle it. Remember our video where I talked about, pick the right blank for your application? Well, here you go. This one's got a whole lot more of that flipping stick style appeal to it, but you've still got that soft tip because you still got this big, huge crankbait. As that fish is shaking and torquing, you can grip that hook free really easy. So you still got to have a little tip at the top of the rod, but this one comes into a big, strong backbone that allows you to get away with throwing these massive lures. And you can really launch them a long way. This one's almost 8 foot long. You can launch that big bait without having to throw your shoulder out in the process. From there, we take another step down in weight to the money crank. Now, the money crank is probably our best-selling cranking rod by far because it is great at throwing a 3/4 to 1.25 ounce crankbait a really long ways. I even go down to 1/2 ounce with this rod. Throws it just fine, and it throws it a long ways. This rod again is 7 foot 10 inches, but look at it now. So we'll try to get it down here where you can see it. You've got a lot more tip on this rod than you had on that Crankin XD rod. So the money crank, you start out with this really soft tip, hard for the fish to shake the lure, but we come into what is a good strong backbone so you can still get a good wind up, heave those big crankbaits out there in open water. Got a good long handle to help with reeling in some of those deeper diving ones. So those are 2 more offshore, deep water style cranking rods. What I would say is our best all-around cranking rod, and I just love this one. I have, it's on the deck almost all the time when I'm fishing shallow, is the Stump Jumper. Stump Jumper's in our Wicked series. And what we're thinking about when we're talking about just your everyday cranking rod, the guy comes in and says, I just want to do it all cranking rod. I want something that I can, square bill with. I can throw a 1/2 ounce fat-free shad with it. I can do a little bit of everything with it. This is the rod I'm going to. And the reason is, this is not your rod you're going to throw that 1 ounce plus bait with because you're going to break it, period. It's not a rod you're going to throw a 1/8 ounce bait with. But it's a very good rod. Look at this. Super nice tip action, and then we still come into a good backbone. So think like throwing square bills around heavy cover. You still got that backbone to pull that fish out of there, but you got that softer tip so that fish can't come up and shake that lure really easy. Like I say, you can get away with up to a 3/4 ounce lure with this rod, but I wouldn't go any higher than that, and really that's even pushing it a little. But for most of our cranking applications in shallow to mid ranges, this one's going to be a perfect rod. There, we're going to go down one more step and say light cranking. So what does light cranking mean? Okay, we're talking about our little wood baits right now. We're talking about those baits, and some of them are 1/8 to 1/4 ounce. Throwing them in the wind on a post-cold front day can be really, really, really hard. So what do you need for doing that? You need a rod that's got a super light whip tip action. So that super light whip tip action is what you need for these type of applications. We make a couple of those. This one is the light crank. The Venom light crank is a great rod for doing that with. It's going to be able to do a whole lot of different things. It's got a super, super soft tip on it. And then in our ESP, this is our trapping wrap. So the trapping wrap is going to be probably the softest cranking rod that we build. And as its name suggests, it's made for those really light crankbaits and for lipless crankbaits, small lipless crankbaits. Think about how easy it is for a fish to shake one of those. He's not going to be able to shake that lure nearly as easy easy with this rod because of this nice light tip action right here. This rod's going to go with him everywhere he goes, and it's going to be a great rod for doing some of those lighter applications. You can still make that cast in that heavy wind, post cold front, and catch those fish. So that covers pretty much the whole line of what we have here. Like I say, we've got 9 different varieties here, everything from light to heavy. So if you're in the Raleigh area this weekend, Richmond area next weekend, stop by and see us. Otherwise, go to jbcustomrods.net and check us out. Thanks, guys.